Welcome into the live desk. I'm Janae Hancock on this beautiful Thursday morning, joined by KCTV 5 news anchor Zac Summers. Zac, today we are going behind the story. I want to take a look at your video here. America's first serial killer family that lived in Kansas. I didn't even know anything about this, so I'm very excited to dive into it. The story of the Bender family, well known as the Bloody Benders, is still fascinating people to this day. Okay, Zac, let's kind of dive straight into it. This is an entire family. We're talking about a mom, a father, a son, and daughter. How did they kill these people?
Yeah. Well,
It's
man,
a lot.
where
It's
do
a
you even
lot.
start with this family? How did they kill, or why did they kill? The why, there's a lot of questions as to why this family did what they did. We know in our research and talking with experts about the Bender family that this family of four, they moved to the U.S. from Germany, and they kind of moved around. They started in New York, then were in Illinois, and then they made their way to Kansas,
Right.
the frontier, where back in the 1800s, you know, the government was essentially not giving away land, but at a very cheap rate, you could buy, you know, 100 plus acres of land for very little money if you build like a homestead on it. And so this family of four, they settled down in southeastern Kansas along the Osage Mission Trail, and they ran a little grocery store inside their very small cabin. I mean, it was only 24 by 16 feet. And the story goes that folks who would stop along the trail for goods would be lured into this cabin. Kate was the daughter. She would sort of distract them, and waiting behind a curtain that divided the cabin would be John Bender Sr. and or his son, John Jr. And they would attack these guests, bludgeon them to death, and then like slit their throat, and they would bleed out into the cellar below. And then from there they would bury these individuals in very shallow graves on their homestead. So
A few interesting things there, because I do have so many questions. But what I found so unique, all the bodies, because it was 8 bodies, right, that were, we
Well,
believe right now.
so they found upwards of 8 bodies on the property,
Right.
but it's believed they may have killed, or they may have been tied to upwards of 11.
Right.
What's interesting is all of these victims were men.
That's what I was going to ask. Well, not really ask, but what I found so unique.
Yeah.
And all of them, the way that they were placed down beneath the ground, face down, right? And
Yeah.
they were naked.
Mostly naked. A lot of them were just wearing T-shirts, which, you know, some folks will theorize, okay, was this family a part of, was this some sort of like ritualistic kind of sick, twisted thing that they did? Because, you know, Kate was a spiritualist. She claimed to be able to talk to those beyond the grave. So it goes back to that. Why they did it, we don't know. It could have very well been that they were doing this just to steal from people. You know, I mean, this was the wild, wild west, if you will. So, you know, maybe they were doing this for a profit, steal these folks' goods, then resell it somewhere else. We just don't know the why, but it is strange that all were men, and the way that many
One
of
was
them were
with a
buried.
baby,
Yeah,
right?
that was and what's really interesting about the baby is they don't believe that the Benders touched the baby.
Oh, wow.
They believe that they placed the baby in the grave of her father, and so she was buried alive because there were no physical marks that would indicate that they had done anything to her.
Harm the baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so the why is still unknown, but what I also found unique is that they basically would have continued their killing spree had they not killed a prominent doctor and brother of a Kansas state senator.
Yeah, that's the belief. Dr. York was very prominent in southeastern Kansas, Labette County, and he was the brother of a state senator. And so when he went missing, obviously his brother, who had a lot of influence, went searching for him. And what's interesting is his brother came across the Benders. He actually talked to the Benders, but they didn't suspect much. And by the time they truly thought the Benders were responsible for his death, they had already disappeared.
Right.
They had fled the area, and they have never been seen again.
Right. So there has never been any justice in this entire situation, this entire killing spree. They just disappeared and no one heard from them since. So
Yeah.
we're still left with a lot of questions, and I think that kind of brings us over to the KU students. How are they getting involved in this?
Yeah, so that's 150 plus years ago, and now you fast forward to present day, and you have these KU students, archaeology students, anthropology students. They have found the Bender's homestead, or what's believed to be the Bender homestead, thanks to a man who actually lives down there and bought the 160-acre property back in 2020. And Bob Miller is a great guy. He's very interested in the Bender story and learning more about them and their victims. He kind of, reached out to the university and told them, hey, I have this land. Obviously, if a lot of folks in Kansas know of the Benders because you kind of learn about it in school from what I gather. And so he was able to connect with the University of Kansas, and about a month or so ago, they had some students down there digging the site believed to be the Benders, and they have found some things down there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So what did they find? Because they're all kind of spread out.
Yeah, you look at that and you're like, what is this? Where do you even start?
Right.
They're trying to find, obviously, the cabin where it was, and the well, and because if they can find those areas, then they can learn more about that time, and maybe even, who knows, find other things, even bodies, bones, from that time. So that happened about a month or so ago, but it's they're in their second year of doing this dig. So in terms of what they've found at this point, it's been like pottery, glass. I think, though, in talking with one of the lead archaeologists down there, I feel like they're not giving us everything that they may have found. Maybe they have found some
Keeping
other
it under
interesting.
wraps.
Exactly. I think because we kind of explore that process, and it's the way the lead professor down there explained it to me. She goes, "We have 10 days of digging, but 10 months of analysis, trying to really dig into what they found and what is it, and what did it mean, and that sort of thing."
I think it's cool, though, that they're going out there and they're trying to discover some new things, but it'll be interesting to see maybe in a few years they finally release, like, okay, this is what we actually found. We just couldn't tell you at that time.
Exactly.
And one of the men you spoke to, he said that he thinks that this will bring tourism to the area.
Bob Miller.
Yes, obviously a lot of people are fascinated by this story.
Yeah, I mean, myself included. I remember when this story came across our desk a couple of months ago, when one of our producers pitched it. I mean, I'm the kind of person, when there's a true crime documentary that is released on Netflix, I'm immediately watching it. So I was drawn to this story too, and likewise, Bob Miller, the man who owns this property, he's hoping that this renewed interest in this family and the mystery surrounding them and what they did down in southeastern Kansas might lead to some tourism, because he's certainly invested, and we know with many mysteries, people across the country are interested. He was telling me how he's gotten inquiries from as far as Florida to California and anywhere in between. So it's a very interesting story, and you just think about that time back in the late 1800s, when they didn't have like telephones and emails and all the technology that we have, and the fact that they were able to like even figure some of this stuff out without the technology that we have now, it really speaks to how innovative they were in what little they had.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting, Zach. I'm just curious. I have so many questions because I'm like, what is the end goal as far as the search? When, if ever, will they just give up and say, okay, we're not going to find much about this?
Well, if you think 160 acres, that's a lot. And I mean, and how deep do they go, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, in talking with the KU assistant professor who was the lead out there for this dig, her goal is that they will continue to dig at this site for the next several years, and in hopes that they might learn more about the benders and or their victims. And one thing too that she said that I thought was fascinating is she goes, you know, a lot of times for these archaeological students, they have to go away to do these hands-on digs. And so the fact that they're going to school in Lawrence and they can actually be a part of a dig that's 2 hours south in the state of Kansas, she says that's a very unique experience for the students.
Right. So I want to ask you really fast before I let you go, because I know you have the noon newscast coming up here in a bit, but what did you find to be the most fascinating? I mean, you spoke to the professor, the students at KU, you also spoke to the man who owns the land right now, and you also spoke to an author. So speaking to all those individuals, what did you find to be the most fascinating?
Well, I think the most fascinating part is this family of four somehow got away with this crime.
Yeah.
I mean, you think upwards of 11 people killed, and they're nowhere to be found. We don't know what happened to them. I think that's the most interesting thing about this whole story is the unknown as to what happened to them.
And how many people exactly did
because that's the thing. We know upwards of 11, but think about it. It's the late 1800s. And mind you, the way they were finding these bodies that were buried, they were literally taking like a stick and poking the ground.
Oh, wow.
And if something came up and they smelled something weird or they saw something at the end of the stick, then they dug. And then they discovered a body. So who's to say that maybe they didn't do enough poking across the land? So
at the right timing as well.
Right.
So alrighty, Zach, where can we watch your story? When will it air?
Yeah, so the Bloody Benders already streaming on our website, KCTV5.com, and it will air tonight at 10 o'clock.
Alrighty, we're going to direct you to our website, KCTV5rightnow.com. Be sure to check it out. You definitely do not want to miss this. Zach, I want to thank you so much for joining me here at the live desk for this week's Behind the Story.